Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome for our latest episode for this week of March 11th, 2024. You may have heard our bonus episode. If you haven't, go take a listen again that we recorded out of a Twitter X space right after the election with our colleagues at the Charlotte Observer. But we've got a lot more post-primary election analysis for you and also looking ahead to what this means for the general election. I'm here with my politics team colleagues, Avi Bajpai, Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and Kyle Ingram. Let's start off talking about some down ballot races that are pretty big significant in the branch of government that doesn't always get as much attention in state politics news, which of course is the courts. Yeah. So Kyle, you're our man on the courts. We had a lot of surprises primary night in Council of State, but also there was one with a court race. So tell us about that.
Yeah, some of the biggest changes we've seen to laws in North Carolina recently have been a result of courts, but they don't get a lot of attention. On election night, there were only 2 statewide judicial primaries. So the first was for Supreme Court. We've got incumbent Allison Riggs, who's a Democrat on the court. She was being challenged by Laura Cubbage, who's a Superior Court judge in Guilford County. Allison Riggs is new to the court. She was appointed by Governor Cooper recently when Michael Morgan stepped down. She's one of only 2 Democrats on the Supreme Court right now. And so it was interesting to see that race play out. She pretty handily won as the incumbent. But it's going to be really interesting in November because Riggs' seat, as we mentioned, is one of only 2 Democrats on a 7-member court. So in November, Republicans have the chance to increase their majority to 6-1 if they beat Riggs.
So Mike Morgan resigned right around Labor Day, and then a week later, he entered the governor's primary, the Democratic primary, and he lost to Stein. But Riggs was already a familiar name before being appointed. Remind people who she is if they hadn't already been aware.
Yeah, Riggs spent some time on the Court of Appeals before this, and then she was also voting counsel for the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. She litigated some big voting rights or redistricting cases, so she's been sort of a known quantity in North Carolina.
So what's the general election going to look like?
It's going to be Justice Riggs versus Jefferson Griffin, I believe, on the Court of Appeals as well. He's the Republican. He wasn't challenged in the primary. And then we also had the Court of Appeals race on Tuesday, which was really interesting. Court of Appeals doesn't get a lot of attention either. But I believe there's 3 races up in the general for Court of Appeals, but only one had a Republican primary. And it was the incumbent judge, Hunter Murphy, versus Chris Freeman, who's a district court judge in Rockingham County. And it was a really interesting challenge because Murphy had pretty early into his tenure on the Court of Appeals got censured by the Supreme Court because of the actions of his personal assistant and friend who worked on the court with him. And the Supreme Court in their censure found that his friend had sexually harassed and threatened female clerks in the court. And so they censured Murphy and said that he didn't do enough to stop it. And he had this challenger come out of Rockingham in Chris Freeman, who is actually a friend of Phil Berger Jr. on the Supreme Court. They worked together when Berger Jr. was the DA in Rockingham County. So he had friends in high places. And, he didn't get an official endorsement from Berger, but he had photos with him and things like that. So he pretty handily beat the incumbent Murphy. I believe he had 65% of the vote or something like that, according to unofficial results.
All right. The other down ballot, but it's still high. It's so funny. We talk about down ballot, but these people have significant impact on our daily lives. And really, local government, a bit more even than top of ballot or mid ballot. So wherever on your ballot for our listeners with the primaries for the General Assembly, Luciana, you were watching that on election night. We had some surprises we talked about that maybe we're not going to know exactly how they play out. What were the big, upsets really, or potential upsets?
Yeah, so there were about 40 or so contested primaries in the legislature. And there were a lot of Democratic incumbents who had challengers. And in particular, a big one was Sen Mike Woodard. he got a challenger from Sophia Chitlik. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but Woodard has been a lawmaker for years at this point. He has been on various committees. He is known for working sometimes with Republicans. And so he's been just a figure, noteworthy figure in Durham for a while. And he had that challenger and he ultimately lost. So it was a pretty big upset. And then another Democrat who had been years at the General Assembly is Representative Michael Ray. And he also lost his race by very, very little. So that one was a nail biter till the end. And
is that one's close enough that it could end up going to a recount? Or, I mean, we don't know, like, as we're recording this a few days before people listen, and we still have several days, I guess, before the final canvass, right?
Yeah, it's a 42 vote difference. So it's very, very tight. So it's within the 1% threshold for a recount. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting race, and we'll see what happens. And then also there was another tight one, which was Representative Cecil Brockman. He also faced a challenger. He's also a Democrat. He also has voted at times with Republicans. So he lost to James Adam, the former president of the High Point.
I think he's actually ahead of James Adams right now by, was it around 80 votes?
Oh, yes,
yeah.
One narrowly. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, he won very narrowly. And I know Avi spoke with him.
Yes. Tell us about Brockman.
We should mention, I mean, we're talking about unofficial results from election night. So this is with all the precincts reporting. But of course, there are provisional ballots in every county across the state that have, officials have to basically go through and determine, are these legitimate provisional ballots? Are they eligible to be counted? So when you're talking about margins of, 40 votes, 80 votes, I mean, we have to wait and see what happens when the results are certified. But yeah, I talked to Brockman. I mean, I think the sort of takeaway from this is that this has been a long-standing, sort of issue that's been bubbling up, in the Democratic Party.
Brockman is like pretty. He's not happy with how he's been treated within the party lately.
Yeah, no, he's been vocal. I mean, he's been talking about this for a long time, going all the way back to Representative Tricia Cotham, her decision to switch parties last year. Brockman had some sort of like tough love for the party, for his colleagues, saying, we have to sort of foster an environment where people can vote their conscience, they can vote their what their district, and not sort of suffer or pay a price for it. But that's very much sort of the accountability message you're seeing from some of these people who encourage these primary challengers. They really want to hold these Democrats to account. They say, you're in safe Democratic districts, you need to sort of reflect the will of your constituents. So this is, I think,
for the caucus, I guess, right?
Yeah,
I mean, all our listeners at the building know that, it's the 3 C's: your conscience, your caucus, your constituents. Yeah. And what is in the first place kind of changes. Yeah. So they say your constituents, but it's your caucus telling you how they want you to represent your constituents.
There's a lot of factors at play.
But the constituents are the voters. Yeah. So, I mean, they're the ones that decide.
I think long story short with this is that this is not, the fallout over this is going to continue, if it ends up being that Representative Ray loses and Brockman survives, this is going to continue to be a animating issue in the Democratic caucus and for Democratic voters, because it's just, it's a difference of, what is sort of the broad view, what kind of, they talk about, like, Brockman talks about a big tent party. So this is going to, I think we're going to continue to see this short session next year as well going forward. This is not going away. This is going to be something that the party really has to grapple with.
Luciana, did you see any overall trends on Democrats or Republicans with, were there any really large margins for some? We talked about the close ones. Were there any just very much a given that, the challenger was just swatted away by an incumbent maybe?
Yeah, I mean, some other Democrats who had incumbents who have, could be considered moderates or at times is Representative Carla Cunningham, as well as Representative Willingham, and they both won their races by, I think, 80% to 20, something along those lines. So those were wide margins. And then I think it's also interesting that some Republican incumbents had challengers as well. like Representative Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so he lost that race, I believe, by very little as well.
And that maybe could change
Yeah.
with the canvas, or depending on the spread there, or maybe not as
Well,
much.
I mean, always a good reminder. The State Board of Elections kept reminding us, elections are far from over on election night. There's a lot of processes that have to go into effect to certify that results. It probably won't be done until near the end of the month.
But still a little faster than maybe in
Yes.
some previous ones.
I
So-
mean, he did tell me he wasn't going to request a recount, though. So
Oh,
maybe
okay.
that'll change.
All right.
But
Yeah.
I spoke with him. He told me he wasn't thinking of that, and
Yeah.
that he really didn't want to give comment, but wasn't sure what had happened because he's been there, I think, 10 terms, and his challenger is a younger,
We've got to take a quick break. We'll be back with more post-election primary analysis and what that means for the general. We haven't even talked about Attorney General yet. And then, of course, our picks for Headliner of the Week. We'll be right back.
So good, so good, so good.
New spring arrivals are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Get ready to save big with up to 60% off Rag & Bone, Marc Jacobs, Free People, and more.
How did I not know Rack has Adidas?
Because there's always something new.
Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
It's crunch time at work, and you need to bring wings to your workday. Visit redbull.com/gettingitdone and answer a couple questions about your work style to get a Spotify customized playlist tuned to your productivity. Plus, score a can of Red Bull on us while you go from to-do to done. And remember, Red Bull gives you wings. Supplies are limited. Terms apply. Visit the website for more information.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with politics reporters Kyle Ingram, Avi Bajpai, and Luciana Perez, Uribe, Guinassi. Before the break, we were talking about those court races and the ledge and what that means. There's another race that sometimes it doesn't get as much attention if there's only one primary, right? So we talked about the governor in our immediate post-primary podcast and the other council of state. But someone else on council of state is the attorney general. And the Democratic primary was decided. Avi, it seems like, so Jeff Jackson won,
Yep.
but Satana DeBerry maybe did a little bit better than people thought, right?
She posted 33%, I believe, of the statewide vote for AG. So, I mean, that was one of the questions. I think the Jackson campaign, I think most people expected him to win. He did win, pretty decisively, 54% to 33. But, you're talking about when you're talking about the AG's race, in 2020, Attorney General was decided by 14,000 votes, less than 14,000 votes. So this has the potential to be a very competitive, very close race, very expensive race. And one of the arguments that the DeBerry campaign, DeBerry herself had been making, I spoke to her myself, but she made this argument throughout the primary campaign was, she was questioning to what extent Jackson would be able to turn out. And also, this isn't exclusive to AG. You see this playing out in the governor's race as well, the Democratic primary. But basically, the argument is, is Jackson going to be able to turn out voters, Black voters, young voters, other voters who might be excited by her candidacy? Are they going to turn out with the same level of enthusiasm in November? And, she, in her case is specific. She's talking about Durham, other parts of the state as well, but she's talking about Durham, where she's won twice as DA. Durham can, historically prove to be sort of the deciding factor. Late votes coming in from Durham. If the turnout isn't as high, then that could be the difference between a Democrat and a Republican being elected. So I think
They're not going to vote for Dan Bishop, right? So let's talk about the Republican.
They're not going to vote for Dan Bishop, or if you look above, they might not vote for Robinson or for Trump, but they might stay home. That's the whole question.
And that's the presidential race. That's the governor's race. That's a factor in everything about voters who just don't care, either don't like anybody or aren't excited.
We're already,
right?
The discourse, I mean, if you talk about top of the ticket with the presidential race, we're already months into this discourse of like immense voter apathy and frustration. Like, oh my God, it's going to be another Biden-Trump rematch. Are we prepared for that? Where we're barreling towards the same contest. So it's going to be, it's something to watch between now and November, how this plays out. Because this is not just in the AG race. This is something that Mike Morgan made this argument, and Stein has had to contend with this as well. So this is something that is worth watching as we head towards November.
Well, let's talk about Jackson and Bishop. Jackson was, very recently a state senator. He ran for Congress knowing that they were going to redraw the maps and he'd probably be drawn out. And, eventually that did happen. And he was in the U.S. Senate Democratic primary and dropped out to support Sherry Beasley, who ended up losing to Ted Budd. Yeah. Bishop is also a figure for a while, both in Congress and before. Yeah. So
Bishop, people in the state know Bishop from the whole, 2016 House Bill 2. He was one of the, people who drafted that bill. So that he is known for that by a lot of people. But of course, Jackson and Bishop are both, I think it's fair to say they're both like two of the most prominent members of the congressional delegation right now. They really have sort of capitalized on raising a national profile, not just in the state, but across the country. Bishop has risen to prominence as a sort of like leading member of the House Freedom Caucus. He was one of the 20 Republicans that held up former Speaker Kevin McCarthy's, 15 rounds of trying to get elected.
So let's talk more about that. So there's the Freedom Caucus type of wing of the Republican Party. There's the Trump MAGA wing of the party. There's more, I guess, traditional Republicans, establishment Republicans. What do you all think? How do you think that's going to play out? Right, Nikki Haley Republicans. How do you guys think that's going to play out in the general? Luciana, what do you think?
Well, I think it'll be hard to know, but I think in this primary, quite a few that would be considered MAGA candidates have come on the top of the ticket. So I think that could, they could have voter appeal.
Mm-hmm. We also had pretty poor turnout in this primary. And what a lot of political scientists always know is that the type of people who vote in a primary is usually a different demographic than people who vote in a general. These are people who are more in the know on politics. They're more partisan than your average voter. So just because we may see more support for people on certain extremes of the ideological spectrum in the primary, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be wanting a really extreme person in the general.
When we talk about, Big Tent and like the day after the primary, everybody's like, oh, you got to come all together. And I don't think Tillis came around on Robinson, right? So, I mean, you're going to see where, are people actually going to, when it comes down to voting, vote the party they align with, and how much of personality is going to come into play.
But that is another key point, which is no matter how much there are factions inside of both parties and there are tensions, we're like in this age of negative polarization. That's basically like the primary thing, for these big races. So as we get closer to November, you're going to see Republicans saying, well, do you want 4 more years of Joe Biden? You have to vote for a Republican ticket, and the same thing on the Democratic side. So I think there is going to be a fair amount of people falling in line and just voting. Everyone goes back, they center around the negative, partisanship, basically.
And also, I mean, state government and federal government are, 2 different things affect our lives in 2 different ways. But people don't always think that. I just always have to plug, state government, and all the local government people listening are like, no, local government's more important. Different ways. All right, let's get to our headliners of the week. Luciana, who or what is your headliner of the week?
Well, my headliner is the lovely day today. It makes me want to go outside and just stay outside. But unfortunately, the weekend will not be as lovely. But
so touch grass.
4 more. I want spring to hurry up.
Yeah.
That's like an evergreen message for everyone's sanity. Touch grass.
Go
outside.
More political people probably need to do that. I have actually literally been down and touched grass before, and you need to. All right. Avi, what's your headliner?
I'm just going to say, relatively smooth day on Tuesday with everyone going out to vote, implementation of voter ID, and results. I think most importantly, results coming in pretty quickly. I think Kyle is going to talk about maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, but, we had clarity by, 9:30 p.m., 2 hours after polls closed. It looked pretty clear. Results were coming in quickly across the board or across the state. So
And AP called races earlier than I thought.
yeah, there were some calls like the second polls closed as well.
All right, Kyle, what's your headline?
Yeah, things did go really well. We were prepared for delays, but it really wasn't that bad. But I'm going to reserve my headliners for Wake County and Pender County. Wake, just because it's one of the most populous counties, if not the populous county in North Carolina. And we were waiting on Wake for, I think it was maybe the second or third last county to report any precinct results. So we were just kept hitting refresh on that county map. And then Pender County came in dead last with its precincts. So.
All right. So yeah, Raleigh and Wake usually outpaces Charlotte. It's like we're kind of close, but usually we come out the winner. All right. Speaking of competition, my headliner is March Madness. I'm excited. Tournament time. And can't wait. Looking forward to it. All right, that's it for this episode of Under the Dome. I'm Dawn Vaughan here with Luciana, Kyle, Avi for the News and Observer, and Charlotte Observer if we've gained any new listeners from our Observer Twitter space this past week. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.
Hey, marketers, listen up. Before this, there was this. Our voice. It's how we shared knowledge, build communities. Well, guess what? Voice is back. That's why Spotify Advertising has published a new report, The Sound On Era, because audio moves culture forward. And if your brand wants to be heard, you need a Sound On strategy. Go to ads.spotify.com to download The Sound On Era and turn up the volume on your business.